How do everybody? I've got a bit of a mixed bag of a video with this one. I'm going to be sort of exploring a few different areas, but I do think they're all linked. And as I've said with the videos in regards to like conscription and various different military affairs, I do believe that those things signal future intentions of the government. Well, I think I've got a bit of a mixed bag here of things which also are indicative of what you would call signalling. Not necessarily intentionally, but I do believe sort of give a sort of game plan away if you can read between the lines and play a little bit of conspiracy theory with it. Before I get on with that though, I'm going to play two short videos for you. Be about a minute and a half to a minute and 3/4 long, that's all. One from the late and great George Carlin, saying about how you don't need a conspiracy for things to be done, in far better words than I could ever do it. And the second one is an infamous speech by Humza Yousaf, the now unelected head of the SNP in Scotland. So anyway, I'll leave it here and just crack on with them two videos, then we'll carry on after that.
Were created here in California, not as a result of a conspiracy, but because...
You don't need a formal conspiracy.
Right.
When interests converge, these people went to the same universities and fraternities, they're on the same boards of directors, they're on the same country clubs, they have like interests, they don't need to call a meeting, they know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies, there are now 3, it will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties, there are a handful of insurance companies, there are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice.
Right.
You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
That's a great point. Right. And speaking of...
in the room. But why are we so surprised when the most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white? Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
Right, so I'm not going to necessarily feed straight into those two videos immediately, but I've put them at the beginning more just to get things into people's minds. As I say, it's going to be a bit of a mishmash, this, and I'm not quite sure how to structure it or put it together, so you have to excuse me, and I will put links into everything. Now, we've had the recent debacle with Matthew Stadlen, and I believe he's now an ex-LBC presenter, who a couple of years ago did a tweet where he said basically he'd never get mugged in London. He's liked too much. Anyway, he's been mugged recently, so somebody's gone past him on a bike, grabbed his phone out of his hand and rode off. And this man has desperately tried to play this off as it being a white person, except for the fact that in the still image that he released himself of the mugging, you can clearly see the individual's left hand on the handlebars, and there is no glove on the hand, and that hand is of a man of African and or Jamaican origin. Well, I say Jamaican, Caribbean origin, so Afro-Caribbean origin. We've also had various pundits, on the left who've been showing us basically that all the main leaders, as you'll see in the thumbnail of this video, are not of indigenous British origin. Now, I'll read you out a tweet here. For me, I think some people are reveling this as some form of historical revenge. So this is a man called Ewan Herbert. I will link this tweet in the bottom. I'll also screenshot this in case it deletes it. So, for the first time in history, the leaders of all 3 nations on the island of Great Britain, Albion, are the fruits of the British colonial empire. To the racist, I say, if Britain didn't colonise the world wouldn't be in Britain. If you just climbed out from under a rock and are wondering why Lee Anderson and the gang are screaming and whining about wanting their country back. He has turned off replies to this, apart from people that he approves. So we obviously knew that this would be quite provocative. that to me sounds like he is saying this is revenge for history. It also sounds like he's saying that the reason why this has happened is because the British people are now weak. So these people were able to get into power because of the weakness of the British people. What I would reply to him is by saying would be, what will happen if the British people decide not to be weak? That's a question, obviously, that I don't think that these people have considered. So I'll just go to another one here. We've also got Dawn Butler MP. She's decided to share a small excerpt of her book. I'll read this out. The top 3 things you should not say. This is her her tweet, by the way, before we get onto the excerpt from a book, which is a small photograph. The top 3 things you should not say when being accused of being a racist, saying something racist, or dismissing racism. Extract taken from the book A Purposeful Life from author Dawn Butler. Why she's referred to herself there in the third person for that, I don't know. Now, she has put a winky face after it, emoji, so maybe she's done it tongue-in-cheek. But it does seem quite strange that she has referred to herself there in the third person. So here we have the 3 points from the book. I haven't got a racist bone in my body. Racism doesn't exist in your bones. It exists in your mind, in the amygdala. Second point, I have a, and she's highlighted this, I have a black friend, which is highlighted. Having a black friend is not your get out of racist jail free card. Point 3, I don't see colour. It is wrong to say that you don't see differences, as it dismisses people's experiences, and quite frankly, it's offensive. I'm happy being an Afro-Caribbean woman. To say you don't see differences doesn't help the fight against racism. I mean, these 3 points are just prove to me that it doesn't matter what you say to these people, nothing is ever right unless you completely capitulate to their points. And I think a lot of this as well is they've war-gamed a lot of this as well. So basically, I don't think these people are here to have a debate on these topics. They are here to absolutely crush the people they see as their opposition. So if you are against, and this goes to all things. So in the same way that there are only, I can't remember, it's 7 or 13, but I think it was Shakespeare said there's only a certain amount of stories that can be told. So you have, like, say, a comedy, you have a tragedy, etc., etc., etc. I'm not into that sort of thing. I just know there is a limited number of actual stories. So every single film, every single theatre production, every single book that's ever, fictional book that's ever been written, they all fall under at least one of those categories. And it's the same with what these people have done with debating. It doesn't matter what you say; they'll put them into a particular category of what type of argument you're putting forward, and they will have a rebuttal straight away to feed back at you. And they've basically flowcharted this to what they see is the logical conclusion. It's a 0 point game to them, and nothing you say will ever please these people. So my advice with this is just accept the slurs and just carry on with whatever you're saying, because nothing you ever say will ever appease these people. And if you're refuting, you're losing. It's as simple as that. We have another similar example of this, and this is from a person called Dr. Bella. So, and this is her point. Xenophobes hate being called racist. Then brackets, I'm not racist, I just don't want illegal migrants, they say. Asylum seekers are legal. 86% of small boat migrants were granted asylum in 2023. Well, cut the BS. We know the real reason you don't like them. It begins with a ra and ends with a schism. I mean, with that point, 86%, the only reason why 86% of these small boats do get granted asylum is because of the system that we have in place. I mean, we could, in theory, have a completely different system in place where 0% of them would be granted asylum. Would that mean that we are still a word beginning with ra and ended with schism? She probably would then change her argument and then complain about the system being wrong. And this, again, is part of the problem of these people. There's absolutely nothing that you can say to these individuals that will change their minds. They're not in it to try and negotiate. They are in it purely to win and purely to crush their opponents. And we've got to stop playing the game that these people are playing. Just accept the slur and then carry on with what you're saying. As I said before, if you're refuting, you're losing. And it's just now I'm just going to get onto like the actual state of things. And a question that we need to start asking ourselves as well is this good for us? Is this good for our people? Is this good for our civilization? Is this good for our culture, our values and our traditions? So a few news stories here that I'll link everything below so you can check it out yourself. I don't want to get too deep into any of it. I just think it's good sometimes to hear a lot of different things to sort of culminate a larger idea rather than burying down into the details of a single point. So anyway, award-winning fish and chip shop ordered to take down Union flag. So what we've got here, basically, there's a chippy in London somewhere. And outside it says, a great British meal, about maybe 5 to 6 foot high, this mural, by maybe 8 to 10 feet wide. And then it's got a picture of a fish wearing a sort of tuxedo and a bowler hat, and he's holding a flag, of a Union flag behind it, fluttering in the wind, and then a big bag of chips next to it. Absolutely, completely unoffensive. The owner of this chippy, by the way, he's not indigenous British. I believe he's Cypriot and has been in the UK 20 years. I could be wrong on him being Cypriot. He may be from one of the other sort of islands in that part of the world. Definitely Mediterranean. Not on the mainland either. He's one of the islands, off one of the Mediterranean islands. But I'm 99% sure that he is Cypriot. But again, somebody's put a complaint in with the local council, and the council have gone all over it like a tramp on chips, basically. Pun intended. It's just, again, these people aren't in this to negotiate. They are in to win. They are in to crush, and they are here to destroy everything that we hold dear, that we value, and that we care about. And they don't care what they have to do to destroy all of that. These people are pathological, in my opinion, and they will burn the entire country to the ground in order just to get rid of what exists, and in their mind they find offensive. Another story. Well, I did start off with one story here, and I just went into Google to look this story up, and this is definitely where the question, is this good for us and our people? It's to do with, in Bristol, teachers are now teaching students to save lives after stabbing incidents in Bristol. But then I was quite shocked at the amount of stories that came up after that. So that's 9 hours ago, that story. Today being, I believe, the 17th of March, 2024, the year of our Lord. But then we have, on the 27th of April, 2023, Manchester Evening News, children as young as 11 are being taught how to deal with stab wounds. Then on the 5th of March, 2019, Daily Mail, school pupils have lessons in treating stab wounds. 3rd of May 2023, the stark warning to school kids taught to treat knife wounds. 4th of October 2023, Durham school children treat stab wounds as part of first aid course. 11th of July 2023, West Midlands young people taught first aid for stab wounds. And it just goes on and on. I mean, here, 6th of March 2019, knife crime, pupils given lessons on how to treat stab wounds. It just goes on and on and on. That was never a thing when I was at school. I left school in the year 2000, 16 years old. That's when I did my GCSEs. That was never a thing then. First aid then was CPR, basic CPR, just an introduction for kids. Something that did stick in my mind, but I've had reinforced through later life with some of the jobs that I've done. Never anything about stab wounds. The only time I got taught about stab wounds and things like sucking chest wounds and gunshot wounds was when I was in the military training to go to Iraq and then Afghanistan. Which tells you everything you need to know about what's been done to our country. And I'm not singling out every single person there who's new to Britain. There's plenty like that guy who owns a chippy. Seems like an upstanding, brilliant member of society. Got more power to him. I'm very glad that he's come here and he's doing something positive, but clearly something is going very, very wrong. And these people who are against traditionalism and against... I would say these people who are pro mass migration and come out with every argument under the sun. I mean, going back to Dawn Butler's point in a book, point number 3, where she said about differences in people and that we should accept there are differences. Well, these people are happy to say that when it suits them, but then when we turn around and say something like, about 80 to 90% of all grooming gangs are Pakistani, Bangladeshi Muslim men, well, then you're not allowed to talk about differences, are you? Then it's, well, everybody commits rape, or whatever argument they like to come out with, then differences don't matter. Then we're not allowed to talk about differences. Or if we talk about things like what people hold, like things like, I don't know, female genital mutilation, cultural differences like that, or like we're seeing in Haiti at the moment, how quickly cannibalism has suddenly appeared there. These are differences in groups of people, and it hasn't been reported, but has been in Nigeria. Mass cannibalism is happening currently in northern Nigeria, coinciding with the genocide of more people. More Christian Nigerians have been genocided in the last year than people have been killed in Gaza. But yet again, the left don't want to talk about that. These people who are pro, and I do suspect it links in with people who voted to remain in the EU as well. I do think that there is a definite link there. I'm not saying it's 100% solid, but I imagine there is a massive crossover to do with that. Oikophobia, basically. I mean, here, another example, there was a talk of, with all these protests going on in London, the Israel-Palestine protests, and they were called no-go zones. But then we had all this no-go zone, no-go areas of London. This is LBC. There aren't any, except maybe packed Oxford Circus on a Saturday. So then we had the gaslighting of various people, including some Jewish people who were protesting against Israel. And I'm not against the premise of protesting itself, but then to turn around and say to people, you don't really feel scared. I mean, to say somewhere's a no-go zone is purely subjective. You know, like I would say Afghanistan is a no-go zone. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people living in Afghanistan. It doesn't mean that you couldn't visit Afghanistan and not get killed. It just means that a no-go zone means that there is a much higher likelihood of things going bad for you. You know, it's like in the worst parts of Detroit in America, the city of Detroit. You know, like there's a much higher probability of me getting shot there than shot where I live. Detroit, for me, I would class as a no-go zone. Does that mean I can't visit Detroit and not get shot? Of course it doesn't mean that. Of course I can visit Detroit and not get shot. But it's still a no-go zone. And this is what these people do. They play. But then, again, and this is the sort of wordplay that they say. But then on the other hand, they'll turn around and say the British countryside is racist and colonial white space and that black people aren't welcome there. Well, of course black people are welcome there. But then that's when subjective matters are okay. And we should listen because it suits their cause. And this is the problem that we have, is that we are trying to negotiate with them, but they are not negotiating with us. They are trying to set out the rules, and they will contradict themselves, they will lie, they will cheat, they will do whatever it takes to win. And we have to stop playing their games on this, I'm afraid, because all we're going to do is keep losing, keep losing, and keep losing. And what future do you want? Because as far as I can see, the Western nations are going the way of the indigenous Americans or the Aboriginals, and I believe that's what they're trying to do to us. And as George Carlin said at the beginning, there doesn't need to be a mass conspiracy in order for it to happen, and in order for these people to make things work, and in order for these people to do things, because they all frequent the same sort of groups, they all socialise in the same areas, and as such they're all exchanging ideas amongst each other. And you see the signalling as well if you look on Twitter, the way that they all sort of communicate to each other is all a form of signalling. And as long as we keep trying to refute what they're saying against us, we're going to keep losing and they're going to keep winning, I'm afraid. I've got nothing much more to say than that, but if you found that interesting or it's giving you something to think about, even if you don't agree with me, please put comments below. I love replying to them and reading them. And definitely like and subscribe if you have found this video useful in any sort of way. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Have a good evening and bye-bye.